The season we are in. We have been in a series of messages focusing on areas of work and study, thinking especially of the kinds of areas of work and study that you all are engaged in. And today's topic is art. So I want to talk about those who are working and studying in areas of visual art and design, music, literature, and to focus on what these areas of work and study have to do with Christianity. How does our Christian faith touch our work and study in those areas? I realized as I was preparing for this that it's a subject that is deeply important to me. It's become more and more important to me in these last several years of my life. And as I was preparing, I realized that my soul has been opened up to seeing God in art in ways that I don't think I could have predicted when I was younger. I'm hoping to introduce some of that to you tonight. I realize also that there are a good number of artists in the room. Who is an artist in the room? Anybody who's involved in studying or working in any of those fields of art, design, music, literature? Anybody make music? Anybody make art? I know some of you are earning your livings that way, making art. One of the things that has struck me in these last years of my life is that loving God should not mean having a narrower and narrower set of interests. Loving God doesn't mean reading only the Bible or listening to only worship music. In fact, just the opposite is true. Love for God should produce a wideness in our loves and an expanding appreciation for God's good world. Open up with me to Psalm 19, which is a passage in the Bible that addresses this question. Psalm 19 describes the way that the author thinks of God revealing himself, God speaking through his word and his world. Psalm 19, beginning in verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth. Their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. In those 6 verses, the author has described the way that the universe itself, the skies and the earth, the stars and the sun, the way they declare the glory of God. His praises, his goodness, his greatness is evident in creation, in the world that God has made. And then in verse 7, he transitions to talk about the way that God is revealed in his word. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. By them your servant is warned. In keeping them there is a great reward. But who can discern their own errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of transgression. May these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. The author is describing the way that we recognize God in his world and in his word. May it be true about us also, that we can meditate on the way God is present and revealing himself in the world around us and in the words that he has revealed to us. The New Testament makes even clearer the way that God has revealed himself, his word, not just as book, not just as pages, but as person. Jesus is God's living word. We encounter God in Jesus, in the incarnation. That, in fact, is what we are celebrating, what we are recognizing as we move into the Christmas season. The Advent season is the looking forward to his coming and looking backward to the fact that he, in fact, has come. God has made himself known as Jesus, as human. I'll come back to that idea of the incarnation. But I think it's closely connected to why Christians should care about art. Maybe that's not a question that you've thought of for yourself. Maybe even you are studying art or you've been in an artistic profession and it hasn't really been a question on your soul, but I want to raise it for you tonight. Why should Christians care about art? Appreciating beauty is a spiritual discipline. Appreciating beauty is a spiritual discipline. We grow in our appreciation of beauty as part of our ability to recognize God's presence in the world, in the things that he has made, and in the beauty that his creatures have made. Seeing God in art, in music, in poetry is a spiritual discipline, and we grow in our capacity to appreciate the beauty of God in the world around us. God's beauty is there. And we are, all of us, to some degree, blind to it. Learning to appreciate God's beauty in the sun and the stars, in the grass and in the flowers, in the paintings, in the music, in the poetry, in the literature, in the architecture. That's part of our spiritual formation. It's part of our growing in maturity toward Christ-likeness. Something that's struck me about this, a truth that taste is subjective, but quality is not. That's an important truth. And in any field that you study, it's a truth you'll need. Taste is subjective. Quality is not. You like what you like, and in fact, you only have indirect control of your tastes. You do have some control over your tastes, and that's important. but you only have an indirect kind of control over your tastes, what you like. But quality is not just a matter of taste. Quality is objective. There is good and better music. Maybe you like Shakira. And that's fine. But hopefully you aren't confused about whether Shakira is better than Mozart. Taste is subjective, but quality is not. We grow in our ability to appreciate better and better quality. That's true, I have found, in coffee. When I started in coffee, I didn't know anything about coffee and couldn't tell the difference between bad quality coffee and good quality coffee, and they are different. It's true in wine, it's true in music, it's true in poetry, it's true in architecture. And in most of those fields, I'm only an amateur. In fact, you're all amateurs. There are no real experts in beauty. There's just too much of it to be a professional. We can only ever increase in our ability to see beauty, but never really master it. There's always more. My daughter Ruby, she produced this when Ruby was 4. It hangs in my office. This is me. This is Ruby. I think this is Alev, her sister, and Jonah, her brother. At 4 years old, this is how Ruby depicted her brother, Jonah. Ruby is now 20. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, she produced this. Ruby is not confused about which one is better. And you should not be. I am equally pleased with both. Taste is subjective. It has a value to me, this drawing. But quality is not. And this is better. Ruby is now studying art at Wesleyan University. She looks back at these drawings from even 2 years ago and thinks, because she has grown so much in her capacity, in her abilities, in these last 2 years. We grow not just in our ability to produce better quality drawings, paintings, music, poetry, but in our ability to see it, to appreciate it. If you don't love excellent music, that's okay, but you can if you want to. You can learn to love better music. That's the wonderful fact about maturity. We can learn to love the Word of God. We can learn to love the beauty that's in God's world. We can learn to have an increasing ability to appreciate higher quality music and literature, paintings and drawings and films. That requires opening our soul to see it, and it requires setting myself on a path to grow in my capacity to appreciate it. As in any other area, growing doesn't happen accidentally. I have not studied art, and so if I made a drawing of Jonah at 47 years old, it would still look a lot like this one. Growth doesn't happen accidentally. I want to show a painting here. This painting is by William Holman Hunt. It's called The Shadow of Death. It's a painting of Jesus. I sent it to the WhatsApp group as well. But if you can see it from where you're sitting, or if you have it open on your phone, maybe you can see that it is clearly Jesus. It's a young Jesus. It's Jesus in his carpentry studio. Jesus it looks like he's rejoicing or dancing, but you can see the shadow. And in the shadow, it looks like he is being crucified. And the hammer and nails, the crown of thorns. There's a number of symbolic elements, the halo that's formed in the window behind Jesus. Jesus' mother, Mary, at the foot of the cross, looking at his shadow, the crucified Jesus. There's depth here. There's real goodness here. It's worth spending some time meditating on, thinking about. This is an example of explicitly Christian art. But what makes art Christian? What makes a poem a Christian poem, or a painting a Christian painting, or a film a Christian film? I will tell you that most Christian films are not worthy of watching. Most films that go by that name just aren't very good. And so I'm not interested in most of them. What makes art Christian? I want to give a handful of answers to that question. One is that the motivation of the artist to glorify God in his expression, that is part of what makes art Christian, our motivation. And a piece of art might be legitimately an expression of worship if the artist has intended that, even if the artist has not made a painting of Jesus. The motivation to glorify God. Second, art might be Christian if it illuminates something true. If it sheds light on a truth, even if that truth is dark or complex or not overtly theological. If it sheds light on truth, we might think of it as legitimately Christian. And I think that we ought to be concerned that art does not delight in evil as a whole. That doesn't mean that stories should not have villains or characters or depict things that are evil in the world in a realistic way, but that the story or that the intention is not to glorify evil or subvert the truth. If those are approaching a kind of criteria, then it's not about whether I've painted Jesus or put little crosses in my latte art. It's about an inward motivation so that the content is reflective of God's beauty, of God's truth, which is more than just the body of religious truths. God's world is wider than that. That's what the incarnation proves. God becomes human. He lives among us, and in doing that, he redeems body, physical things, matter, that the world is good. God's good world is still good. It does bear the corrupting influence of sin, which will continue to be corrupt until the second coming of Jesus. But this is God's good world. And he is in it and doing wonderful things in it. And he has redeemed this world by coming as man. Jesus gives us an example of embodied truth and beauty. This is what we're celebrating at Christmas. And so we sing songs about it. And we think about God as man, living among us. The incarnation redeems our presence, even our suffering in the world, is made part of God's good plan. That he is bringing all of creation to his intended outcome, even the things that are unpleasant, even the things that are genuinely awful. When we create beauty, or when we appreciate beauty in art, it is a participation in creation. God has made us in his image, and one of the ways that we reflect our God-likeness is that we join with him in creating. In a very limited way. God creates out of nothing. We create from what he has made. But he has given us an ability to join with him in the making of beautiful things. Jerry, a few weeks ago, mentioned the example of Bezalel, the first person in the Bible described as being filled with the Spirit. In Exodus 31, he is not a worship leader or a preacher or a prophet. He is an artist. He's making the artifacts for the temple. He's the first person described in the Bible as being filled with the Spirit. We participate in creation. We join with God when we make beautiful things and when we learn to appreciate them. We are recognizing God's beauty. We are seeing God as beautiful when we recognize the beauty of a painting or a piece of writing or a song. Even if that painting or poem or song is not explicitly about God, in the way that David can see God's goodness in the sun, and the way that the Spirit can fill Bezalel to make candlesticks. I want to share a poem from Gerard Manley Hopkins. Hopkins is if there's one poet who was instrumental in my becoming a poet or learning the beauty of poetry and wanting to write, it has been Gerard Manley Hopkins. He's got lots of wonderful, excellent poems. The poem that really converted me was a poem called The Windhover. But the poem I'm sharing with you tonight is a poem that is about the topic that we're discussing tonight. It's called As Kingfishers Catch Fire. Let me read the poem for you. As kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring, like each tucked string tells, each hung bells. Bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me. For that I came. I say more. The just man justices, keeps grace that keeps all his goings graces. Acts in God's eye what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places. Lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes, not his. To the Father, through the features of men's faces. Hopkins here is recognizing the presence of Jesus in the people around him. The participation of his people in God's own work in the world. That second stanza. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his. That is, the presence of Jesus right there in your eyes. The incarnation being reenacted
lived out in your life, that you represent God in the world, made in God's image in this world.
It's a deep poem. Maybe some of the language is difficult for you.
I kind of hope it is. It's worth spending some time with it. Hopkins is not on trial. If you don't like the poem, I promise, it's not his fault. Hopkins is not on trial tonight. You are. Can you see what is good in it? That might take some work. That work is what I'm talking about tonight. It's worth doing.
We can see throughout the history of the church the way that art has been such a vital piece of the church's expression of worship, the church's expression of the presence of God in the world, in architecture, in icons, in classical paintings, in music, in the worship songs that we sang tonight. God's people have expressed themselves in singing, at least since Exodus chapter 15, when, having crossed the Red Sea, Moses and Miriam, first worship leader in the Bible is a woman, you do with that what you will, they sing and lead God's people in worship there on the other side of the Red Sea. They sing. And God's people have sung ever since then. We still do. Right before Jesus is crucified, there at the Last Supper, before being handed over in the Garden of Gethsemane, they sang a hymn. And then they left off together. Sometimes our churches have reduced spirituality to evangelistic efficiency. That art is good based on its evangelistic bang for buck. Efficiency is not a gospel value. I will leave that with you. It's a sermon for another day. Efficiency is not a gospel value. Sometimes in our churches, it is almost as if the uglier it is, the more spiritual it is. You can see that sometimes in our architecture, in the way that we sometimes, as Protestants especially, are averse to beauty. Look at how plain and ugly our worship space is. We obviously love God. But I want to suggest that that's a bad way of thinking about your spirituality. Not because the motivation is wrong, just the expression, I think, is wrong-headed. The Annunciation icon. From the earliest centuries of the church, Christians have depicted through traditional Christian art, what we today call icons, the scenes of the gospel, messages about, in these visual form, messages about the characters and events in the Bible and in the saints that have gone before us. This is one of the classic themes of Christian iconography. It's a theme called the Annunciation. In this icon, which is quite a traditional icon, you can see the angel Gabriel descending to announce to Mary that she will give birth to the Messiah. And in this icon, there are the traditional themes of an Annunciation icon. The angel, the Spirit, we're coming back. You can see the Spirit represented by that dove there in the heavens that are moving close here. The angel, the Spirit, Mary there, and the flower. Annunciation icons often have white flower, which represents Mary's purity. And in this icon, you can see that Jesus, who is the Lord of the worlds, Jesus there in Mary's womb,
still larger than the cosmos. There's so much being communicated in this icon. It's an Annunciation scene. I was recently in a museum, a famous art museum in Chicago, the Chicago Institute of Art, and I was struck by so many of the wonderful paintings there. One of them that really struck me was this. I've shared it with some of you in other contexts. Very different from the icon that we just looked at, but it is called the Annunciation. And this is, Jay DeFeo is her name, the artist's name. She has in this painting made an abstract version of an Annunciation icon. In the classic Annunciation icons, you see the angel, and in this painting, it is the angel which dominates the scene. The wings, spread wings of an angel, and the painting is huge. Standing before it was awe-inspiring and painted as if in motion, these wings. And down here, something that resembles a bouquet of flowers. But on this side, what seem to be claws. There's something a little bit intimidating about this painting. As all of the experiences, the encounters of angels are in the Bible. Every encounter with angels in the Bible is an awe-inspiring and intimidating one. This painter has made an abstract version of the Annunciation, using those classic themes and describing them in an abstract form. These days, I often find myself captivated like this by an image, a song, a piece of writing. And it's worth spending some time thinking about what's good in it. I'm learning, in fact, in that discipline, to see God in it. I had an experience like that recently, too, with a song that I want to share with you. I'll play the video. I can prepare you now to say that you probably have not heard anything like it. It's classical music. Carolyn Shaw is a classical composer and singer. She is a Pulitzer Prize winner for her compositions. So again, she's not on trial. She's good. And this piece is beautiful. And I was reading philosophy and preparing for my dissertation with some headphones in, and this came on, and I stopped and listened and played it again and cried. I want to share it with you. Whether you'll have a meaningful experience with it or not, it's okay. But I want to share it, and I'll talk a bit about it. It's just 3 minutes long. Pause that for a second. Let it load again. We're going to come right back to that. I'm going to let that load so you can listen to it without interruption. So as I come back to that, let me share a bit about this. So I until the last 5 years, never really thought of myself as artist. I was learning to appreciate beauty, but not until about 5 years ago that I started thinking about creating something. Writing poetry for me started just as a personal devotional practice. I would write some things, psalms and prayers in my own notebooks that no one has seen and no one will ever see. But eventually, slowly, I started writing more intentionally for a broader audience and started reading more poetry, started being able to hear poetry, started submitting to journals, and started wanting to improve my ability to write, growing to recognize deep beauty and goodness, even beyond what I can create. And that's what happens when you start down this path. Today, I write. I publish poems. I've got this book called A Dance in Medias Res. Talk about it in a second. I've published in about 100 different journals, or I have about 100 poems in journals, which is pretty neat, amateur numbers still. But where I'm at now, I can recognize the kind of beauty and complexity and goodness in poetry that I am unable yet to create. I cannot do what I can see is good in Gerard Manley Hopkins. I'm not there yet. I wrote this book, A Dance in Medias Res, which is a book of theological poems. The title, A Dance in Medias Res. In medias res is a literary term. When a story starts in the middle of the action, we call that being, the story starts in medias res. In the midst of things, it literally means, but it means in the middle of the action. And a dance in medias res, it's a line from the first poem in the book, which is a description of the Trinity. God, as Father, Son, and Spirit, has been in an eternal dance, which even when creation is started, that dance has already been going on, and we come on the scene in medias res with an opportunity to join the dance. Its poems are arranged from transcendent to immanent. There are theological poems arranged starting with what God is like and moving through the collection to poems about more earthy things. Let me read to you a poem toward the end of the book on page 50 called Rock Collection. Lale's not here tonight, so I can tell you that it's about her. My daughter deposits a rock into the round-top treasure box that guards her growing collection. Thuds and rattles sound the value of each piece to her, and so to me. What distinguishes these from those scattered in the garden outside isn't quantified by qualities or colors or mineral compounds. She likes them, and that's enough for both of us. She knows I keep rocks of my own. A brown round one in my briefcase, gathered from a gravel driveway, a stone altar to remember losing a long season of love. We look at it together sometimes, so she can share its worth with me. A pebble 3,000 miles from the rubble heap, not because it shines, but because we look at it sometimes. And today, squinting from the sun on my front porch and the planet, I'm learning to see the beauty as Christ opens to me his treasure, composed of rocks, thuds, and rattles, heaps of things and shining people, gardens and memories of loss, a collection, a stone altar. Beautiful, because he keeps it, and we look at it together. Listen to this song. group. You can listen again. I want to end with talking about, as creators, for those of you studying or working in this field, what are the dangers for a Christian in artistic field? I get a sense from some of my colleagues or some of my friends in ministry that they think of art as somehow risky. So what are the risks? What are the dangers? The first is vanity. Vanity is a danger in creating art. Vanity means that you're making something to glorify yourself. I want to be famous. I want to be affirmed. I want to be liked. Self-glorification is vanity. But it's a danger in every profession. And we as creators need to think about how our life of creating is part of our worship. Can you see your design, your art, your painting, your music, your literature, your writing? Can you see it as part of a life which is lived in glorification of God? Vanity is a sole danger in art. 2, the second danger, shallowness. Shallowness is an evil. It is what makes something ugly. Cutesy, cliche, kitsch expression. It's a distraction. It's a way of avoiding the world as it is. It's a reluctance to confront the real creation. And so, a reluctance to confront the Creator. Sappy sentimentality, shallowness, should have no place in Christian creation, in expression, in art. God invites us to confront the real world, to see it as it is, to recognize Him in the midst of it, and to participate in its renewal. Shallowness is a danger, and you should avoid it. The third, mediocrity. Related maybe to shallowness, maybe shallowness sometimes comes from mediocrity. But half-hearted, sloppy, unthoughtful expression is unchristian expression. And that's true in every field as well. Sloppy, half-hearted, unthoughtful math or science is unchristian math and science. Mediocrity is a sole danger in expression. And fourth, I alluded to this earlier, delighting is evil. Delighting in evil is a danger in art. Often, delighting in evil or glorifying evil in expression is more popular than goodness. Goodness is not often popular because it is more nuanced, it is more complex, it's harder to see, it's harder to appreciate, and so evil is easy and cheap and sells. Delighting in evil is an evil, is a danger in Christian art. When I say Christian art, I mean Christians in art. Because as I said, so much of what goes by the name or the title Christian art is bad. And so I don't recommend most of it. Sometimes Christians use that title or they excuse a lack of quality or a lack of real engagement with the world as it is. Because in the end, it's about Jesus. I want to suggest that even if it's about Jesus, it can be bad. Art, as our genuine expression, should glorify God in the best way that we can. Now, when Ruby was 4, this was her honest expression. And it was good for Ruby. She did well. No evil in it. if Ruby did this today out of laziness, it would be wrong. So what do we do? How can we take some steps moving forward in this area? I want to recommend that you read some poems. Of course, that's what I'm most familiar with. Read poetry. You know, when I'm writing a poem, I'm not just trying to say what I could otherwise say in propositional prose, but say it in some rhymey, cutesy way. I'm not interested in that. A poem should say something that cannot be said in prose. That's its value. Read some poems. Watch films, and watch them with a critical eye, not just to consume something for distraction, but as a reflection of God's presence in the world. And so watch it with a critical eye to see where the goodness is and where it is not good, for all of the reasons that we have suggested might make a film or a piece of art good or not. Learn to appreciate paintings. Even the really old paintings from dead men. They're worth appreciating. And expand your musical taste. I like blank. I know. I like Shakira. Fine. But learn to like Mozart also. You can do that. You set yourself on that path by exposing yourself to it, by listening on it, by focusing on it, by doing the work of trying to understand what's good in it. Mozart's not on trial. I think the more you engage in that kind of growth, the more you are, in fact, participating in your own transformation toward Christ-likeness. It is a spiritual discipline to learn to appreciate beauty. And I would also suggest try your hand at creating. You can't be an expert at everything. You can't be really great at everything. You don't have an obligation to. But try something. Write. Try writing a poem. Even if it's just going to be in your own notebook, a psalm between you and God. Draw something. Paint something. You know, these last several years since I've been here, we've done art, interactive art pieces as part of our Christmas and Easter celebrations, like the flowers there behind you, those tulips on the staircase, which were for an Easter celebration a couple years ago. All of the paint colors inside the tulips are skin tones of people in our church. Or the sunrise scene by the top of the stairs there by the bathrooms, which was also made by our church. That kind of interactive, corporate producing art is fun. Try creating something. I also love to create in the kitchen. Gastronomy. It's artistic expression if you do it with that intention. Any gastronomy people here? You studying gastronomy, Gabriel? You're cooking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gastronomy certainly can be a legitimate field of art. Sometimes you eat something that's so good and you think this is evidence for God's existence. The culinary argument for God's existence. It's dark. So, I will wrap up there, repeating what I said at the beginning, that loving God shouldn't mean having narrower and narrower sets of interests. Love for God should produce a wideness in our loves, an expanding appreciation for God's good world. I will turn it over to the XIs.